Just a quick video to talk about screws and springs on woodwind instruments, because there have been some students lately that have had some issues, and I just want to make sure that they have an idea of what they're looking for so they can report problems. First of all, you might be thinking of springs like Tigger's tail, and Tigger's tail is curly and the springs on woodwind instruments are not. So a spring on a woodwind instrument looks more like a needle. So the main rod is here, and underneath of it you can see a little tiny, almost needle-looking thing. And that is the spring on this flute. And here on this clarinet, the large silver piece up here is the rod, and then the smaller needle-looking things are the springs. We ask that you not take your own springs off or put your own springs back on, because that can cause problems if you bend them the wrong way. Your teacher has a special device called a spring hook. So here, this spring is now off. You can see that it's not attached to anything. If you bend it, it will no longer work because the tension in it is pushing it the right way to change the instrument. So clarinets, that's what a spring that is off looks like for you. And flutes, and of course the bell's ringing in the background. And flutes, here we have a spring that is off. Yours isn't sticking out as much, definitely harder to see. Come on, selective focus, you can do it. But it is not connected, it's just kind of floating near it without being connected. So if you ever get a spring off, you can let your teacher know, and they'll use the spring hook to get it back on and make it work. So I said I was also going to talk about screws. There's a lot of screws on instruments, on woodwind instruments, some of which are adjusting screws that make it how high or low the button closes. And if you start tightening or loosening the adjusting screws, then you are no longer going to have an instrument that works. Then there's other screws that hold rods on and hold pieces on, and if you over tighten them, if they get too tight, then the rod will become clamped down and stiff and it won't rotate. So once again, you'll have an instrument that will not work. So in general, if you see a screw sticking out, let your teacher know. Your teacher will hopefully, or Mr. Simmons will definitely know whether or not it needs to be tightened or adjusted or not tightened, and we can make sure that we don't damage the instrument. Now, if it's to the point that clearly a piece is about to fall off, it's really loose and wobbly, that becomes a really urgent thing. And if it ever does fall off, a piece falling off, make sure that you have the screw and the piece so that it can be put back together. If you actually lose the part, it becomes a much bigger deal to fix it. All right, so there's some information about the screws and about the springs on woodwinds.